The second I hit post, I knew exactly what was about to happen. My parents weren't going to feel guilty. They weren't going to have some grand realization that they'd screwed up. No, they were going to be angry, because for the first time ever, I wasn't just quietly taking their neglect. I was showing the world exactly what kind of parents they really were. And sure enough, less than an hour later, my phone exploded. First, a text from my mom. "Jake, what is this post?" Then my dad. "Are you serious right now?" Then a full-on call. I watched it ring, then another, and another. I let them all go to voicemail, grinning as I imagined my mom pacing around the house, seething, trying to figure out how to spin this into me being the problem. Finally, on the fourth call, I picked up, keeping my voice as casual as possible. "Oh, hey, Mom, what's up?" She didn't even pretend to be calm. "Jake, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Enjoying my birthday?" "Don't be smart with me," she snapped. "Why would you post something like that? Do you have any idea how this makes us look?" There it was. Not, "We're sorry," not, "We should have been there for you." Just pure, unfiltered damage control. I leaned back in my chair, smirking. I just thanked the people who actually celebrated with me. Not sure why that's a problem. "Jake," she hissed, "you're making us look like bad parents." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh? You mean the parents who ditched their son on his 21st birthday to take their golden child out to dinner? Those parents?" I could hear her face turning red through the phone. "That's not fair," she snapped. "We were celebrating Sophie's big moment." "Right," I said, my voice flat, because her good news automatically cancels out my birthday. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Jake." "Dramatic?" I repeated, laughing bitterly. "You mean like ditching your son on a milestone birthday and then getting mad when he doesn't keep quiet about it?" She let out a sharp breath. "Enough. Take the post down." Now I grinned. "Number Jake," she warned. "Take it down." "Or what?" I challenged. That shut her up for a second. Then my dad took over, his voice low and threatening. "Jake, you're acting like a child. We are coming over." My grin widened. "Great. See you soon." I hung up before he could say anything else. Natalie, who had been sitting beside me, raised an eyebrow. "They're really coming here?" I nodded. "Oh yeah, they're furious." Her dad chuckled from across the room. "Let them come. They need to see what a real family looks like. And honestly, I was counting on it." I leaned back, arms crossed, completely unfazed. "Oh, you mean standing up for myself?" Sorry, still getting used to that whole self-respect thing. My mom let out a sharp breath, her patience wearing thin. "We are not going to let you publicly shame us like this. Do you have any idea how many people have seen your post? Your aunts? Your uncles? Do you know how humiliating this is?" I blinked, then deadpanned. "Maybe don't do humiliating things then?" From the corner of my eye, I saw Natalie stifle a laugh, and even her dad had to turn away to hide his smirk. My mom's face turned red. "We are your parents, Jake. We deserve some respect." I tilted my head. "Oh, you mean like the respect you showed me when you ditched me on my birthday? Or when you laughed at me on the phone? Or when you made it abundantly clear that Sophie will always come first?" I shook my head. "Sorry, I must have missed the part where you actually earned my respect." My dad stepped forward, his voice low. "You're being dramatic." "No," I shot back. "I'm finally being honest." The room was tense. They weren't used to this. Me standing my ground, refusing to fold like I always had. Then my mom's eyes landed on Natalie, specifically the way she sat comfortably beside me, holding my hand like she belonged in my life. And that's when I saw it. The moment my mom realized I had people now, people who weren't obligated to love me but did anyway. People who saw my worth, and she hated it. "So this is what this is about," she sneered. "You're trying to replace us with them." Natalie stiffened, but I just shrugged. "If the shoe fits." My dad scoffed. "Enough of this nonsense. You're taking that post down," I grinned. "Number?" His nostrils flared. "Jake, don't test me." "Or what?" I challenged. "You gonna ground me? Take away my phone?" "Oh wait, you can't, because I don't live under your roof anymore. You have zero control over me." That hit a nerve. My dad's face turned an ugly shade of red, and for a second, I thought he was actually going to lose it. My mom, on the other hand, had gone eerily quiet, and that's when she played her trump card. "You're going to regret this, Jake," she said softly. "You don't realize what you're throwing away." I raised an eyebrow. "And what exactly am I throwing away?" She smiled, smug. "Your inheritance." I stared at her for a beat. Then I laughed, like full-on laughed in her face. "Inheritance?" I wiped an imaginary tear from my eye. "Mom, you act like I didn't already know where I stood in this family. Do you really think I care?" She faltered, clearly not expecting that reaction. I leaned forward. "You've never given me anything. Not your time, not your support, and definitely not your love. So spare me the speech about what I'm losing, because you've got nothing I want." My dad's jaw tightened. "You're ungrateful. We gave you everything." "Everything?" I scoffed. "You gave me scraps. You gave Sophie everything and expected me to be grateful for whatever was left. But guess what? I'm done fighting for a place in this family. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine." My mom's eyes widened, like she finally understood. This wasn't a tantrum. This was me walking away for good. "You can go now," I said simply. "Enjoy dinner with Sophie. Maybe she can start paying your bills instead." My dad opened his mouth, but nothing came out. They had nothing left to say. I turned to Natalie's parents, giving them a grateful nod. "Thanks for letting me have this moment. But I think it's time they leave." Natalie's dad, ever the composed one, straightened. "I agree." My mom looked like she wanted to argue, but for once, she didn't have the upper hand, and she knew it. So she did what she always did, huffed, spun on her heel, and stormed out. My dad followed without a word. The second the door shut behind them, I let out a breath I didn't even realize I was holding. Natalie squeezed my hand. "You did it," she whispered. "You stood up for yourself." I nodded, feeling lighter than I had in years. "Yeah," I said, a small smile forming. "And I'm not going back." I raised an eyebrow. "Attitude? Oh, you mean standing up for myself?" "Yeah, still getting used to that whole self-respect thing." My mom exhaled sharply, already at her limit. "We are not going to let you publicly shame us like this. Do you have any idea how many people have seen your post? Your aunts? Your uncles? Do you know how humiliating it is to have our own son paint us as villains?" I blinked at her, completely unfazed. "Maybe don't be villains then?" From the corner of my eye, I saw Natalie bite back a laugh, and even her dad smirked. My mom's face burned red. "We are your parents, Jake. We deserve respect." I tilted my head. "Oh, you mean like the respect you showed me when you ditched me on my birthday, or when you laughed at me on the phone? Or how about the way you've spent my entire life making sure Sophie always comes first?" I let out a low chuckle. "Yeah, I must have missed the part where you actually earned my respect." My dad took a step forward, voice dropping into something low and warning. "You're being dramatic." "No," I shot back. "I'm finally being honest." The room thickened with tension. They weren't used to this. They were used to me folding, to me backing down, apologizing, trying to fix things. But not this time. And then my mom's gaze flickered to Natalie, her eyes narrowing as they landed on the way she sat next to me, her fingers casually intertwined with mine. And I saw it. The exact second she realized I had people now, people who weren't obligated to love me, but did anyway, people who saw my worth, and she hated it. "So that's what this is about," she sneered. "You're trying to replace us with them." Natalie stiffened beside me, but I just shrugged. "If the shoe fits," my dad scoffed. "Enough of this nonsense. You're taking that post down." Now I grinned, slow and deliberate. "Number." His nostrils flared. "Jake, don't test me." "Or what?" I challenged, leaning back like I had all the time in the world. "What exactly are you going to do? Ground me? Take away my phone? Oh, wait. You can't. Because I don't live under your roof anymore. You have zero control over me." That hit a nerve. My dad's face darkened, his jaw tightening like he was barely keeping it together. My mom, though, she had gone eerily quiet, and that's when she played her trump card. "You're going to regret this, Jake," she murmured. "You don't realize what you're throwing away." I raised a brow. "And what exactly am I throwing away?" She met my eyes, her expression shifting into something smug, something calculated. "Your inheritance." For a second, I just stared at her. Then, before I could stop myself, I laughed. A short, sharp, genuine laugh like she had just told the world's funniest joke. "Inheritance?" I repeated, shaking my head. "Mom, do you really think I care?" She hesitated, clearly thrown off by my reaction. I leaned in, voice dropping to something almost amused. "You have never given me anything. Not your time, not your support, and sure as hell not your love. So what exactly am I losing here? A couple of bucks from people who treat me like an afterthought? No thanks. You can keep it." My mom's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. I watched the frustration build in her eyes, the realization that her one last bargaining chip meant nothing to me. "And if you think I'd ever accept a single dime from you after all this, you're delusional," I added, shaking my head. "I don't need your money. I don't need your fake love. You've already shown me exactly who you are, and I want nothing to do with it." My dad's fists clenched. His face was practically purple. "You're ungrateful," he spat. I smiled. "Number..." "I'm free." I stared at my dad, almost amused. "You really want to talk about everything you've given me?" I almost felt bad for him, for both of them. But then I remembered something. They had a choice, too. My dad could have stood up for me, could have actually been a parent instead of a permanent background character in my mother's constant manipulation games. But he never did. And now, here he was, acting like I was the ungrateful one. I let out a slow breath, keeping my voice eerily calm. "No, I'm not ungrateful. I'm just not blind anymore. You made your choices. Now I'm making mine." From across the room, Natalie's dad gave me a nod of quiet support, and when my mom flinched at that, I felt it. A small, undeniable spark of triumph. She had spent so long trying to control me, trying to keep me in check, that she had never even considered the possibility that I might be better off without her. And that realization, it shook her. "You can't just cut us out like this," she said, her voice trembling now. "We're your family. You'll regret this, Jake. You'll come crawling back." I tilted my head, giving her the fakest look of deep consideration before snapping back with, "Oh, right. I'll be there any day now, begging for more neglect and disappointment. Because that's what every kid dreams of, right?" My mom's face burned with rage, but I didn't stop. "That'll never happen. Because guess what? You've already shown me exactly who you are. And I believe you." I stood up, steady, certain, like my body knew this was the moment I had waited for my entire life. "So if you want to keep trying to guilt-trip me, go ahead. But just know, I'm done falling for it." My dad looked like he wanted to argue, like he needed to have the last word. But when he opened his mouth, nothing came out. He had nothing left, no authority, no control, just the realization that his son had finally walked away. My mom's eyes were blazing, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I turned to Natalie's parents, nodding in appreciation. "Thanks for letting me have this moment," I said softly. "But I think it's time for them to leave." Natalie's mom, always the calmest presence in the room, stood up with a small, knowing smile. "We're going to grab a drink in the kitchen. You two should talk." But my mom, oh, she wasn't done. As they walked away, her voice sliced through the silence. "You're making a mistake, Jake. You'll see." I didn't even acknowledge her. I didn't need to, because the truth was, I didn't care. The air between us felt thick, suffocating, as my parents stood there, still struggling to process what had just happened. Their usual weapons, guilt, manipulation, gaslighting, had failed, and for the first time in my life they were powerless. I could feel it in the way my dad's hands clenched at his sides, in the way my mom's nostrils flared as she desperately searched for something, anything, to reel me back in. But they had nothing, not this time. I stood there feeling more powerful than I ever had in my entire life, because this wasn't just about standing up for myself. This was about the realization that I no longer needed their approval. I wasn't looking for validation anymore. I wasn't waiting for them to love me the way they should have all along. Natalie's parents stayed in the background, giving me space, but I felt their support without a single word needing to be said. And that was when I knew I wasn't alone anymore. I had a real family now, people who chose me, people who actually cared. Finally, my dad broke the silence, his voice low, dangerous. "You think this is funny? You think you're going to get away with treating us like this?" I locked eyes with him, completely unfazed. "Get away with it? Dad, I've been trying to get away from you for years." The words hit like a slap, stark, unforgiving, but freeing. My mom, still burning with fury, tried one last time. Her voice softened, but her manipulation was still all over it. "Jake, we're your parents. We've always been here for you. All we've ever wanted was to help you. Don't you remember all we've done for you? We've supported you in everything." And that was what finally made me laugh. A low, bitter laugh, like she had just told the world's worst joke. "Is that what you think?" I shook my head, my grin sharp, because I don't remember any of that. I remember being ignored. I remember being pushed aside. I remember never being good enough, but supported, loved. I took a slow, deliberate step forward, watching as my mom actually leaned back. I don't remember that at all. I remember always being the last choice, always the afterthought. But if my mom wanted to pretend she'd been the perfect parent, fine. Let her have that delusion. It didn't change the truth. And judging by the way her face twisted in shock and rage, she was finally realizing she had lost control of me. She thought I'd fold, that I'd beg for her approval like I always had. But that version of me didn't exist anymore. "This is your fault, Jake," she spat, her voice shaking. "You're the one destroying this family. You think you can just replace us with them?" I met her glare with ice-cold indifference. "No, Mom. You've been replacing me my whole life. This is just me finally realizing I don't need you anymore." I watched as the words landed, as the reality of it seeped in. She had already lost me, and now she knew it. She took a step forward, her eyes burning with rage. "I'm your mother. You will never get rid of me." I held up a hand, stopping her in her tracks. "I don't need to get rid of you. You did that to yourself. You pushed me away for years. You made your priorities clear, and I was never on that list." My dad's shoulders tensed, but he didn't say a word. He knew there was nothing left to say. Then Natalie's dad, calm but firm, stepped forward. I think it's time for you two to leave. Now his voice was steady, unshakable, and it left no room for argument. My mom looked like she wanted to fight back, to claw for the last shred of control she had left, but even she knew it was over. My dad muttered something under his breath and turned toward the door, and just like that, they were gone. No dramatic exit speech, no parting shot, just the slam of the door behind them. I stood there, the weight of the moment settling in. It was over. Natalie wrapped her arms around me, her voice thick with emotion. You did it. You stood up for yourself. I'm so proud of you. I hugged her back, exhaling like I was finally breathing for the first time in years. I don't even know how I did it, I admitted. It's like they don't have power over me anymore. Her parents gave me encouraging pats on the back, but it was Natalie's words that really stuck. You're not alone anymore. We've got your back. Always. And for the first time, I believed it. The night moved on, strangely peaceful, like the storm had finally passed. But that calm? Yeah, it didn't last long. My phone buzzed, breaking the silence. I glanced at the screen, half expecting something harmless. But there it was, her name, my mom. My stomach clenched, but it wasn't fear. It was exhaustion. I didn't even want to read it. But I did anyway. We're not done here. You'll regret this. We're contacting the lawyer about your inheritance. You'll pay for this. I could practically hear her shrill, venomous tone in my head. It wasn't just a threat. It was a promise. But the difference now? It didn't scare me. It didn't hold the weight it once did. I glanced at Natalie, holding up my phone so she could see. She skimmed the message, then snorted, shaking her head. Is she serious? Dead serious, I muttered. But this time there was no anger, no panic. If anything, I was amused. I tapped out my reply, every word landing with the weight of years I'd spent biting my tongue. You're right. You won't be done here, but I will. Keep your money, keep your inheritance. When you're ready to speak to me like an adult, without the guilt trips and manipulation, you know where to find me. But don't waste your time trying to control me again. It won't work. And if you think I'm scared, you're in for a rude awakening. I hit send, and just like that, the weight I'd carried for so long, the pressure to please them, to be good enough for a family that never saw me, was gone. I barely had time to put my phone down before it buzzed again. This time, it was my dad. No text, just a string of furious voice notes. I clicked play, leaning back as his voice filled the room. You're throwing your life away, Jake. You'll regret this. You're making a huge mistake. I let it play out, unimpressed. Next one. More of the same. You're ungrateful. We did everything for you. Another. You'll come crawling back, and another, each one more desperate than the last, but none of it stung the way it used to. I didn't even bother replying. There was nothing left to say. Across the room, Natalie's dad gave me a knowing look. Everything okay? I nodded, my lips curling into a slow, satisfied smile. Yeah, they're just not used to me standing up for myself, but they'll get over it. Natalie pulled me into a hug, her voice soft but sure. They can't touch you anymore. And she was right. For the first time, they had nothing to hold over me. Not their money, not their empty promises, not even the idea of family, because I'd already found something better. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from my sister. Mom and Dad are furious. You really messed up this time. I felt the old anger rise, the instinct to defend myself, to explain. But then I exhaled. I wasn't playing their game anymore. Without a second thought, I locked my phone, looked at Natalie, and grinned. You know what? I think it's time to celebrate. I'm done with this. I grabbed my jacket, turning to her parents with a smirk. Let's grab some drinks. We've got a lot to celebrate." And as we walked out into the cool night air, something settled in my chest, something new. No bitterness, no regret, just the overwhelming certainty that I had finally set myself free. Because family? It isn't about blood. It's about the people who stand by you, who choose you, who love you without conditions. And I had found mine. So tell me, was I wrong for finally standing up for myself? Or was this the karma they had coming all along?